She smiled in that way, the kind of smile that makes your heart skip, even when you know it shouldn't. It was one of those ordinary days, the kind that slips past unnoticed until something small shifts everything. I was sitting alone at my usual corner table in the quiet cafe, the afternoon sun filtering softly through the tall windows. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with a faint hint of old books. The kind of place where time feels a little slower, like it's giving you permission to breathe. Then she walked in. There was something about her presence that didn't scream for attention, but quietly pulled it in. She moved with a calm confidence, the kind that only comes from having lived fully and well. Maybe it was the gentle way her fingers brushed against the edge of her coat as she settled at the table beside mine, or how her eyes scanned the room thoughtfully before landing on something unseen to me. I caught the briefest glimpse of her smile when she looked up, subtle, warm, almost secretive. It wasn't the kind of smile you flash casually. It felt like a small, guarded gift, meant only for herself and those patient enough to notice. The kind of smile that makes your heart catch in a way you didn't expect. Her hair was dark with soft waves, touched by hints of silver at the temples, framing a face marked by graceful lines, not from worry, but from a life deeply felt. She carried herself with an ease that invited curiosity, but held just enough distance to feel mysterious. There was an unspoken story in her eyes, a depth that made me wonder what she'd seen, what she'd felt, and what brought her here on this ordinary afternoon. I remember how my pulse quickened, not from panic, but from the strange warmth spreading through my chest. It was like catching the first spark of a flame, small, hesitant, but undeniably real. I found myself wanting to know more, but unsure how to cross that invisible line between admiration and intrusion. As she reached for her cup, her fingers brushed against the porcelain in a way that seemed effortless yet deliberate, and for a moment, I imagined what it would feel like if her hand brushed mine, the soft weight of skin, the quiet electricity beneath. I caught myself staring and quickly looked away, embarrassed by the sudden rush of feelings I couldn't name. That first glance was fleeting, maybe only a minute, but it planted a seed in my mind that kept growing. Every detail, the way the light caught the edges of her smile, the quiet strength in her posture, the faint scent of something floral and comforting, etched itself into my memory. It was in that moment I realized this wasn't just a passing fancy or a distraction. Something deeper was beginning to stir, a connection neither of us had spoken aloud yet. She smiled in that way that made my heart race, and I knew, somehow, that my life was about to shift in ways I wasn't ready for, but couldn't resist. The days after that first glimpse, I found myself unconsciously drawn to the same cafe, the same park bench, or the same quiet corner of a bookstore, where she seemed to appear like a gentle thread weaving through my routine. It was strange how these chance encounters began to feel less like coincidence and more like a quiet invitation, a subtle opening of a door I didn't know I wanted to step through. Each time I saw her, there was a small ritual unfolding, a glance, a smile, a few exchanged words that felt weightier than their simplicity suggested. Our conversations were light, never forced, but each sentence carried an undercurrent of something unspoken, as if we both sensed the delicate tension growing between us, but neither dared to name it. She had a voice that was warm, calm, and measured, the kind that made even the simplest stories sound like small treasures. Sometimes she spoke about the books she was reading, the art exhibits she had visited, or the quiet joy she found in early morning walks. I listened intently, feeling the space between us fill with shared curiosity and respect. I remember the first time our hands brushed, not by accident, but in a way that felt charged with a quiet electricity. She was handing me a book I had asked about, and as her fingers touched mine, a sudden rush of warmth traveled up my arm, settling like a steady flame beneath my skin. It was a brief contact, yet it lingered in my mind long after, replaying like a secret moment only we understood. There was also the scent she carried, subtle, a soft floral mingled with a hint of something earthier, like rain on warm stone. It became a comfort, a sensory thread tying together these growing moments of closeness. It was never overwhelming, but always there, as if her presence was a gentle fragrance weaving itself into the fabric of my days. In her smile, I began to see new shades, not just the shy, secretive smile of our first meeting, but one that deepened with ease and familiarity. It was in the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed, or the quiet way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. These subtle shifts made my heart beat faster, but there was no rush, no pressure, just a growing warmth, like embers slowly glowing brighter. I caught myself wondering about her life, the moments that had shaped her, the quiet sorrows she carried, the strength she wore like a second skin. It was impossible not to be drawn in, to want to know more while also respecting the boundaries we both held silently. These encounters, brief as they were, began to feel like a slow dance, a rhythm neither of us set but both followed, stepping closer and then holding back, savoring the growing tension without breaking it. I realized then that this wasn't just a passing curiosity or a fleeting attraction. It was something deeper, something unspoken and fragile, waiting quietly to be explored. And every time she smiled in that way, my heart raced a little faster, caught between hope and hesitation. Our encounters began to take on a rhythm of their own, subtle yet deeply meaningful. It wasn't just about the places we met anymore, the cafe, the park, the quiet corners of the bookstore, but the space we created between us, small and intimate, where conversation and connection could breathe. One afternoon, she invited me to join a small gathering of friends at a cozy art gallery downtown. The invitation was casual, almost offhand, but for me, it felt like stepping into a new world, one where I was no longer just an observer, but part of something tender and alive. The gallery was filled with warm light and soft murmurs, and as we moved through the rooms, I noticed how she carried herself with a quiet grace, her eyes lighting up at each piece, her hand occasionally brushing mine as we lingered together. That evening, between shared laughter and whispered reflections on the art, the emotional distance between us softened. She told me stories, small, honest fragments of her past, moments that had shaped her quietly but profoundly. I listened, fascinated not just by the stories, but by the vulnerability in her voice, the way her fingers nervously traced the rim of her glass when a memory was tender or painful. I found myself opening up too, sharing pieces of my world I rarely revealed. We spoke about the loneliness that sometimes settled in the spaces between people, the yearning for connection that felt both thrilling and terrifying. There was no pressure in these exchanges, only a sense of mutual trust beginning to bloom like a fragile flower. During one quiet pause, I reached out instinctively, my hand brushing hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled gently around mine, warm and steady. That simple touch spoke volumes. It was a quiet acknowledgement of the growing bond, a wordless promise that we were beginning something meaningful, even if uncertain. The smell of her perfume mixed with the faint scent of rain lingering on the streets outside, grounding me in the moment. Her presence was comforting, like a soft blanket against the chill of the evening. I noticed the way her eyes softened when she looked at me, a mixture of kindness, curiosity, and something unspoken that made my heart race quietly beneath my ribs. As the night wore on, we walked together under the glow of street lamps, the world around us muted and gentle. She leaned closer to hear me better, her hair brushing my cheek in a fleeting, electrifying touch. The warmth of her breath mingled with the cool night air, and in that closeness, the silent tension between us pulsed like a living thing. These shared moments, small and sacred, wove threads of connection that felt stronger than words. It wasn't about rushing towards something grand or dramatic. It was about building a foundation of trust, understanding, and quiet affection. And every time she smiled, a smile full of meaning and warmth, I felt that familiar flutter in my chest, a reminder that something beautiful and fragile was growing between us, waiting patiently for its time to fully bloom. As the days passed and our connection deepened, a quiet restlessness began to settle in my chest. It wasn't that I didn't want this, far from it. But the more I thought about us, the more I felt the weight of the world pressing in, reminding me of the things unsaid and the lines that felt too fragile to cross. She was older, experienced in ways I was still discovering. And with that age difference came an invisible barrier, like a gentle yet unyielding wall between our two worlds. I found myself wondering what others might think if they knew how much I cared, if they noticed the way my gaze lingered on her a moment too long, or how her smile could make my heart pound without a single word exchanged. There were times when she seemed just as hesitant, moments when her usual calm and grace gave way to a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I caught her withdrawing slightly, pulling back behind that poised exterior that had drawn me in at the start. It was subtle, like a breath held too long before being released, but it spoke volumes. One afternoon, as we sat together on a park bench beneath a canopy of autumn leaves, the silence between us felt heavier than before. I wanted to reach out, to close the gap that had quietly grown, but the fear of overstepping held me back. Instead, I watched her trace patterns on the worn wood with her fingertip, the faint tremor in her hand betraying the calm she tried to project. The warmth of the sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled light on her face, highlighting the delicate lines around her eyes, lines that told stories I could only guess at. My throat tightened as I realized that both of us were wrestling with the same question. Was this feeling worth the risk? Her smile, once a beacon of quiet assurance, now seemed tinged with something else, a mix of longing and restraint. The briefest touch between us, a hand grazing against mine, was sometimes met with a quick pull away, as if we were both afraid of what that simple contact might lead to. I felt the hesitation like a weight settling deep inside me, a tension that prickled beneath my skin and tightened around my heart. It was the fear of vulnerability, the fear that opening up could mean pain, rejection, or misunderstanding. And yet, even in those moments of doubt, there was something else, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, the walls we were building could come down if we found the courage to let each other in. As the afternoon light softened into evening, I realized that hesitation was part of the story we were writing together. It was the fragile pause before the next step, the breath held before a leap of faith. For now, we sat side by side in the quiet, our hands close, but not quite touching, hearts pounding in tandem with the unspoken question hanging between us. And I knew that beneath the hesitation, beneath the doubt, there was a yearning, waiting patiently for the moment we were both ready to embrace it. The evening had a softness to it, the kind that makes the world feel quieter, as if it's holding its breath for something delicate to unfold. We found ourselves walking slowly through the empty streets after a gentle rain, the pavement glistening under the glow of street lamps. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of wet earth mixed with her subtle floral perfume, a scent that had become a quiet comfort to me over these past weeks. For the first time, the guarded walls between us felt thinner, as if the weight of hesitation was lifting just enough to allow something real and raw to surface. She stopped beneath the soft halo of a streetlight and looked at me, her eyes reflecting the gentle light, shimmering with something I hadn't seen before, a fragile openness, a quiet plea for understanding. "I haven't shared this with anyone," she said softly, her voice almost breaking the stillness between us. The words hung there, tentative and heavy with meaning. I nodded slowly, encouraging her without pressure, feeling a flutter of nervous anticipation in my chest. The moment felt sacred, the world around us fading until it was just the two of us, suspended in this fragile space. She began to speak, not about grand dramas or sweeping confessions, but about small moments of loneliness, the kind that nestle quietly in the spaces between smiles and laughter. She spoke of past disappointments and dreams deferred, the hidden scars beneath her composed exterior. Each word was spoken with a vulnerability that touched me deeply, revealing a strength I hadn't fully appreciated before. As she shared, I reached out, my hand gently brushing against hers. The touch was tentative, like dipping a toe in cold water, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled softly around mine, warm and steady, grounding me in the moment. I found myself opening up in return, my voice low and honest, telling her of my own fears, the uncertainty of feeling so deeply for someone so different from me in ways that society might not easily accept. There was a rawness in admitting it aloud, but in her presence, it felt safe, like the first crack in a fortress built too high. The cool night air wrapped around us as we stood there, hands entwined, hearts beating with quiet intensity. Her breath mingled with mine, a soft rhythm of shared vulnerability that needed no words. I noticed how her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the quiet strength of someone who has allowed herself to be seen, fully and without pretense. The tension between us shifted, no longer weighted with fear or hesitation, but softened by the gentle understanding blossoming in the space between us. That night marked a turning point, a moment when the slow dance of our connection moved from tentative steps to something more sure, more grounded. The cracks in her armor were no longer walls, but openings, windows through which light and warmth could enter. And as we walked back together under the canopy of starless sky, I felt an unspoken promise hanging in the air, that whatever came next, we would face it together with honesty, courage, and the quiet strength born of shared vulnerability. The moments we spent together grew longer, more frequent, and yet, somehow, the space between us remained charged with an unspoken tension. We were close, closer than either of us had dared to be before, but the boundary that separated friendship from something more lingered, delicate and almost invisible, like a fragile thread holding us in careful balance. We found comfort in the small, quiet rituals that became our world. Sitting side by side in the cafe, the soft hum of conversation around us faded into the background. I watched the way her hand rested just inches from mine on the table, the subtle curve of her fingers as she reached for her cup. The brush of her sleeve against my arm was electric, a fleeting contact that sent a ripple of warmth through me, quick and impossible to ignore. Sometimes, when we shared a meal, the light from the candle flickered across her face, highlighting the gentle contours of her smile and the softness in her eyes. She would lean in just a little to hear me better, her hair falling lightly against my cheek in a whisper of touch. Those moments felt suspended in time, the quiet closeness brimming with everything we were too cautious to say aloud. Walking together in the park became another sanctuary. We moved in sync, our steps falling naturally into rhythm, the cool breeze carrying the scent of earth and leaves. I caught myself stealing glances at her profile, the way her lips curved into that smile, the one that made my heart race in ways I could barely understand. It was a smile full of warmth and subtle invitation, but also a gentle restraint, as if she too was waiting for something, hoping for permission to cross the invisible line. The tension between us was like a quiet song playing beneath every touch, every glance. We were close enough to feel each other's breath, to sense the steady beat of our hearts, but still holding back, afraid to shatter the fragile balance we had found. Her hand brushed mine once more, this time lingering just a moment longer. The softness of her skin against mine was a silent confession, a promise wrapped in the simple language of touch. Yet, even in that intimate contact, there was hesitation, a pause filled with the weight of what could be and the fear of what might never come. I wanted to reach out and close the distance, to let her know how deeply she had settled into my thoughts, how the sound of her laughter and the light in her eyes had become a part of my everyday. But I held back, knowing that this slow, careful dance was as much about trust as it was desire. The evening light softened around us, casting long shadows as we sat close together, the warmth between us palpable yet unspoken. She smiled that smile again, the one that made my heart race. And in that moment, I realized that some things are meant to unfold gently, without rushing, without pressure. We were standing on the edge of something beautiful, held in the quiet yearning that only comes when two souls are beginning to truly see each other. And though we had not yet crossed the threshold, I knew the moment would come, when hesitation would fall away, and we would finally step into the space where love could grow. Until then, I would cherish the closeness, the silent longing, and the unspoken promise woven into every lingering touch and every glance that said more than words ever could. The evening was wrapped in a gentle stillness, as if the world itself had paused to hold its breath for what was quietly unfolding between us. After all the tentative steps, the lingering glances, the silent hesitations, there was a new sense of calm in the air, a calm born from acceptance, understanding, and a shared readiness to embrace what had been growing slowly, patiently all along. We sat together on a bench beneath the soft glow of a street lamp, the city's distant hum fading into a gentle backdrop. The night air was cool but not cold, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine from a nearby garden, a scent that seemed to wrap itself around us, delicate and comforting. Her hand found mine again, this time without hesitation, her fingers curling softly around mine in a steady, quiet grip. The warmth of her touch felt like a homecoming, a steady heartbeat anchoring me to the present. I turned slightly to meet her gaze, and in her eyes, I saw everything that had been unspoken, the hopes, the fears, the longing, now mingled with something tender and sure. She smiled in that way again, the smile that made my heart race from the very first moment I saw her, and it held a new depth, a promise of something real and lasting. It wasn't a grand declaration or a dramatic confession, but a simple, heartfelt expression of connection. For a moment, we sat in silence, our fingers entwined, the quiet between us full of meaning. I felt her cheek brush lightly against my hand, a delicate, fleeting contact that sent a shiver through me, the kind of touch that speaks louder than words ever could. There was no rush, no need to fill the space with hurried promises or extravagant gestures. Instead, there was only the warmth of two people who had found each other in the gentle unfolding of time, who had learned to listen to the quiet language of affection and trust. I could feel the steady beat of her heart beneath her palm, a rhythm that matched my own, slow and sure. The world felt softer somehow, as if everything had aligned perfectly in this small moment of peace and connection. As the night deepened, we rose together, still holding hands, and began to walk slowly through the quiet streets. The gentle clasp of her fingers in mine was a reminder that we didn't need to rush, that the beauty of what we had was in the patience, the respect, and the quiet courage to be vulnerable with one another. The age gap that once felt like a barrier now seemed like a bridge, a testament to the unexpected ways hearts can connect beyond time and expectation. It wasn't about defining our relationship or racing toward a destination. It was about savoring the here and now, the simple joy of being together, hand in hand. And as we disappeared into the soft shadows of the night, I knew this was just the beginning. A gentle promise that no matter what came next, We had found something rare and true, something that would grow steadily with each smile, each touch, and each quiet moment shared. She smiled in that way that made my heart race, and I finally understood. Some connections are meant to be slow, steady, and deeply felt, unfolding like a beautiful secret between two souls willing to wait for love to bloom.